Welcome to another episode of Hopinions. I'm Steve and with me as always is Martin.
Evening, mate.
Each week we'll be chatting about what's been going on in the industry, sharing our opinions and of course drinking beer. This week we're going to be talking supermarkets and the role that they're currently playing in craft beer. But before that, let's get stuck into a beer, mate.
That sounds like a good idea.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that's bloody lovely. What have you poured for us, Steve?
Okay, so what I've got here, we've got a beer from Odyssey Brew Co. Who are still fairly new to the scene, based in Herefordshire. And this is Ego Wars, and so this is a series of beers that they're doing where they're doing hop versus hop in the beer. So this is Ego Wars version 2, and this is Citra versus Galaxy. It's an IPA, and it's 6.5%.
And it is bloody delicious.
It is really, really tasty, isn't it? There's loads of bags of flavour in there. It's got a lovely nose to it as well.
Yeah, it's loads. I mean, to be honest, I could smell it from when you poured it. I just hadn't paid much attention to what you were doing, but the aroma of it is delicious.
It's a lovely balance of kind of citrus fruit flavours in it, and then there's this really long, bitter finish to it. That's
very
just,
dry end to it.
Yeah,
very
bitter,
dry.
sharp, dry. It's absolutely perfect.
Lovely carbonation as well.
Yeah. Really, really enjoyable beer that. Anyway, let's we'll dip in and out of that as we're going through, because as always we're going to start off with our beery adventures this week. So what have you been up to, mate?
Okay, well, recently went on a Sambrook's brewery tour, and lucky enough that it was an evening when the owner and founder Duncan Sambrook was hosting it. And for anyone who's interested, I did get a bit of an interview with him as well. So that'll be at the end of the show. I've always been a big fan of Sambrook's. So when we got there and he said, what would you like to have to drink? I said, I'll have a pint of Junction, please, because that's my favourite of the cask beer range. But they've also started to branch out into keg. And I tried the IPA, which was on banging form, I have to admit. It's lovely balance between like English malts and American hops. The tap room overlooks the brewery. It's a lovely space. And the tour was really informative, very relaxed. There was only a few of us on it, which was quite nice for me. Got to ask a few questions, take a few pictures of more stuff which are in silver, and pretend to know what beers are in them. So yeah, really, really good fun. Not that bad to get to, 5-10 minute walk from Clapham Junction Station. Yeah. So yeah, but that was a really enjoyable evening. Beer wise, I finally got around to trying the Beavertown Lupaloid.
Finally.
Well, everyone else seemed to beat me to it.
I was going to say, you must be like the last person in the UK to have drunk that.
Even my girlfriend Michelle tried it, as evidenced by the picture last week with Dave, our mascot. So, I thought it was really nice, actually. I mean, it was a banging, well-balanced, fruity IPA. Maybe didn't have the same, hit you in the face as Gamma Ray does, but I thought it was really enjoyable, and at that 6+%, same as you guys were talking about on the Lee's Little Flavour of the Month. I thought it was lovely, really nice beer, and a stunning can.
Yeah, one of the best can designs I think ever.
Yeah, if you're trying to stand out on the shelf, job done.
It does the job.
Done.
Yeah.
And finally, after my little moan last week about Stone, I finally got to try the Go-To IPA while I was in Brewdog in Southampton. Very enjoyable session IPA.
Yeah,
it was nice to get it because I'd been to a couple of pubs beforehand which weren't serving any beers that I liked, so to stumble on the Brewdog and get the Stone Go-To IPA was a very welcome addition to the evening.
Was that on keg?
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Anything else?
No, that was about it for me. It was a fairly low key
week.
Yeah, fairly low key for me.
Yeah. Same here really. I mean, I've not really done that much. There's a few of us went round to last week's guest Matt's bar in his garden on Friday night for a bit of an Oktoberfest session, where we drank. We must have bought the local Audis out of all of their Oktoberfest specials and just drank loads of German lager all evening. And then also on Saturday night I was a guest on the Irish Beer Snobs Beery Chats where we're reviewing some beers from 8 Degrees. Which, if people want to watch that, it's still available online, and there'll be a link in tonight's show notes.
I saw that. I thought that was quite interesting. I thought the guy from 8 Degrees was very good.
Yeah, it was good. I think it was good to have him on because I thought he brought kind of a level of knowledge and background that maybe collectively we wouldn't have aspired to have achieved.
Yeah, I think
without
so,
him.
because he knows everything that they've done from the start, whereas you guys, the Irish Beer Snobs, the Maxwells, and Rory, all know lots of stuff, but not necessarily specifically about 8 degrees.
Yeah.
I thought he was a really good speaker as well.
Beer wise, remarkably, the two standout beers for me this week are both cask beers, which
Shock horror. I'm glad I'm sitting down, mate.
first time I've ever said that. I think on a podcast of any description. First one was Blank Slate, which is it's a new one for me from Hamilton. I've not seen this in their range before. This was a light, something like 3.2% golden ale, which was drinking really, really easy.
Where did you get that?
That was on at the Ale House in Chelmsford. So it was good to see Hamilton reaching out into Essex now.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Beers. And then following on from last week's podcast, we were talking about the new Iron Maiden Red and Black Porter.
Yeah.
I managed to track that down on cask and give that a go, and it's actually quite good.
You're sounding surprised in your voice there, Steve.
I am surprised. I don't know what I was expecting, but it is a really good porter. I think I would use the word robust with it. It finishes with quite a sweet finish. It's been done really well, and I'd be really keen to actually try the bottled version of it to see what it comes across like in the bottle as well.
Okay, so maybe there is a little bit of an improvement in
maybe
fame and beers coming together.
Yes, let's just hold on and see whether that continues.
Okay.
or not. So before we go, again, we're moving things around a little bit this week. So we're going to chat about what blogs you've been reading next. Any more thoughts on the beer as we're still drinking?
It's very, very drinkable. That dryness sort of eases off a little bit. I think just because the more you drink it, that dry finish is easing off a little bit. Bags of those tropical flavours. Carbonation is holding really nicely. I would not know. I would just have automatically assumed Odyssey were based in the States if I was drinking this blind. Mm-hmm. It's a fabulous beer.
That's a compliment right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, that they do. I mean, I've had a few from Odyssey now, and I must admit I've not been disappointed by any of them. They do very, very hop forward beers.
And what size are the bottles?
They're 500 mils, but they look much bigger.
Yeah, they do. They almost look like those pint bottles.
They're like mini bombers.
Yeah.
But they're a nice bottle. The artwork on them is really unique as well. All round good stuff. So I'd keep your eyes out for Odyssey, because I think they're going to be one of the breweries to watch in the next 12 months.
Okay, I'll watch them. More to the point, if you carry on buying them, I'll drink them.
This might not be their last appearance on the show. Okay, so what have you been reading this week, mate?
Okay, well, a few things have leapt out at me. One is from Sophie Atherton, journalist and beer sommelier, who's recently done the foreword on the Cask Report 2017, and she did a bit of a blog about her relationship with cask, especially in her younger days. But the bit which stood out for me, Steve, was some stats at the end of it, which are obviously part of the cask report. And I think this is probably where the whole part of the cask keg and why cask can be a bit fragile at times, and people can have a different relationship or an iffy relationship with it. Some of the numbers which are quoted, and again I'm just quoting from the blog, so I can't add any veracity to this at all, but 1 in 3 pints are served through unclear beer lines. You've also got 33% of glasses are dirty, 35% of glass washes are unhygienic, cellars are running too warm, an average of 4 days per month. 33% of ale pythons, which is what keeps the cask cool, are low on water, leading to inconsistent temperature of cask beer. 1 in 10 pubs has had an issue with beer being served too warm. I mean, obviously what Sophie does say is that there are lots of good pubs and there are lots of great publicans, and we all know some very good pubs who serve some fantastically well-kept cask ale. But it does go to show that it's an art. There is an art to cellarmanship. It's not just connect it all up and out it goes. This is a live product, and it does need a bit of TLC. And I think that sort of highlights where, especially if someone's coming new to cask beer, they can fall out of love with it very quickly.
Absolutely. I suppose the one thing maybe to say about that is that does seem to be all of the negative stats.
Yes.
It would be interesting to see, because there's got to be some positive stats
definitely
somewhere.
Definitely.
So it would have been interesting to maybe balance those out with a few positives as well, rather than just focusing on the negative aspects.
Oh yeah, good point. And maybe I'll set myself a task to find a few of the positive ones, because like I said, we all know the good pubs. We all have good pubs. We all have pubs where we will trust the cask beer output, even if the cask beer isn't to our liking. We won't say it's bad, and I think that's the difference. Not every beer is going to be to your liking, but you want it to be served the right way. So, but as a set of stats, I thought, well, okay, yes, they are negative, but it sort of puts into sharp contrast. You probably don't get some of those. Wouldn't always apply to other ways of getting beer, bottles, cans, or keg.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, but it's like you say, we've probably all fallen foul to one of those misgivings over time.
Definitely. But the next one is from the Telegraph, and it ties in with one of the beers from your beery adventures, Steve. So rock and roll stars who have created their own beer.
Oh, we mentioned this last week as well.
Yeah. But they've done a bit of a list. The first one which caught me, because this probably hasn't come across in the past, but I'm a very big Beatles and Paul McCartney fan, and Paul McCartney has created an ale which he uses hops that are grown on his land in East Sussex, but it's not on sale. He gives it away to friends and family. I'm guessing he doesn't need the money, to be honest.
Yeah. Does he brew it himself then?
That doesn't say, I have to admit, but I know that in his early days, when he was doing a lot of when he first started getting into the vegetarian thing with Linda McCartney, they were very much about doing their own stuff on the farms.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, the one of the first non-Beatles albums they did, Ram, was all about, the reason why they did that is because of the sheep on the farm, etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was he had an element of interest. I couldn't say for certain. I'd like to think he has, and then in which case I'd definitely want to taste it.
Yeah,
just to see what it's like.
But then he's because if he is at that point, he's like any other home brewer, isn't he? He can't sell his beer unless he goes through the prerequisites.
Exactly.
HM Customs, so he's got to give it away.
Giving it away makes it a lot easier, doesn't it? Queen Bohemian Lager. So this one is I've got no idea what this one's like. Handcrafted Pilsner from the Kingdom of Bohemia, Czech Republic. So I'm guessing a bit of a Pilsner.
Yeah.
So I think they're more of a play on words for that one than anything else. Obviously Trooper, Iron Maiden, done with Robinsons. And the only other one which caught my eye was a beer called Fuzzy at 8.5% with Welsh Rockers Super Furry Animals, which they did with Celtic Experience. And I had to admit, I've always been a bit of a fan of Celtic Experience beers. And Super Furry Animals I've heard of as well, so that's always a good start. And 8.5%. I mean, if you're going to dive in and do a beer, do it bigger.
Yeah, why not? Get straight in there.
Get straight in there on that one.
I think this is, and I said this last week when we was talking about the Motorhead beer. This is definitely one that I think we're going to have to do a feature on in the future. Band tie-ins, are they actually any good? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think our experience of Trooper put us a little bit off.
I think so, yeah.
But maybe we're pulling it back with your more recent experience with the Red and Black. So,
but again, not to take anything away from them, Trooper has been a massive commercial success for Robinsons.
Yes.
It's been very much driven by the Iron Maiden name behind it.
And the label. The label is like an album cover.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's great because it's possible that beer has introduced a lot of new people to real ale. It's possible. I'm not saying it has.
I mean, it's not to my liking. It's a brown malt bomb.
But obviously, you've got your likes of Signature Brewers as well. We've done lots and lots of collabs with people as well, and it's great to see these kind of tie-in beers. I think now becoming available at some of the concerts as well, where the bands are
still
playing.
Not enough of them. When I went to Foo Fighters last year, it was still the same old shit in plastic bottles.
Yeah, well, Foo Fighters haven't brewed a beer yet.
I know.
And if they did, it would be the best beer ever.
And the last one was is a blog, Seeing the Lizards, bizarre stuff seen from the bottom of a bottle or a glass, entitled Expectation, and this is basically about when you're buying beer in supermarkets. So there's an obvious reason why I've chosen this one, but it actually sparked my interest beforehand anyway, especially from somebody who grew up above an off license. Mm-hmm. So mum and dad would be asked questions about predominantly wine, because we lived above the off license between the 70s and 80s. So beer was very much macro. It's very much macro lager. Stack 'em high, sell 'em, and this was before supermarkets really got in on the beer scene. Now that the beer scene, you can buy alcohol very easily in supermarkets and stuff. This is really about, what the supermarkets bring to it versus, getting it elsewhere. The link to this one will be in the show notes. I don't want to say too much else about this one, apart from it did pique my interest, mainly because a lot of what's in here does filter through into, our opinions for this week anyway. And that's about it for me.
Okay, so are we going to link? We'll probably link all of those through in the show notes as always, if people want to check them out and read them. But as you say, the last blog there from Seeing the Lizards about supermarket beers does very much tie into this week's opinions.
Opinions, 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 opinions.
With the advent of craft beer sections in supermarkets, are new drinkers being duped by cheap or macro impersonators? So that was the question that we asked. A lot of people took umbrage with the word duped. I think we were just trying to get the question out there. Let's not focus too much on the words that we put in the question. But we had a lot of people got involved this week, so 275 votes.
Well, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's probably one of the highest ones for opinions. 69% said yes. 18% said beer is beer, and 13% said no. So a resounding landslide victory for the yes side there. Some of the comments that came in. So Tom Stefanakis at Tom G Steph, noticing it both in supermarket and bars, e.g. Blue Moon and Coors New Prava, making beers up with no heritage. #no. Katrinas, not bothered about the size or what defines craft. It bothered me that they'd made up a new brewery to sell the beer though, and she was referring to about a year ago a range of beers appeared in Tesco's from the Metropolitan Brewery.
Yeah,
it was Green King.
Yeah,
she was very upset by that duping that she underwent there. Roland Blue has been New Boy. Not sure new drinkers care, hence they can't be duped. It's informed drinkers who get caught out and upset. So I guess he's referring to the likes of ourselves that do get upset when Green King create a new brewery to try and sell beers in Tesco's. James at Gammon Baron went slightly off topic and said, has any macro come close or nailed it yet? Only M&S seem to get it right with their own brand craft, which is a great
it's a good point.
Comment on its own.
Slightly off, but there is a connection there.
Yeah, so we might come back to that actually to chat about M&S. Oliver Cunningham at Falk and Carrot, I don't think so, as long as you look for honest labelling that clearly indicates who brewed it and where. And then finally, Mike Hampshire at Nate 1982. I voted yes, but on second thoughts, how can you be duped over something that has no clear definition? And that's where things started going a little bit awry.
Because that would explain all the responses then.
We then got into a discussion where Miles Lambert, a further question, is it time we stopped using the difficult to define term craft? If anyone can use it, and that was backed up by Roland again, who said, not sure you can say people are being duped without stepping into the what is craft minefield.
Just to be clear, we're not stepping into that minefield.
We're not stepping into that minefield. We're never going to step into that minefield. It's one that doesn't really need doing. So, those were the views of Twitter this week. We've got some bits to chat about there. We've got the blog, and we've got some stats here as well around supermarket beer sales. Let's get in and share our views first of all though. So Martin, what are you thinking on this one?
Okay, well, unlike last week where I didn't really give it much thought at all because I had a very firm opinion about it, I've given this one a bit more thought this week, and I voted without commenting, but I voted beer is beer, to be honest. A few reasons for this. One is that I personally don't feel duped when I go to the supermarket, but that could just be because for that particular product I'm buying, I have a little bit of knowledge behind me. And that tied in with one of the tweets I did read from Ian Barnard that, perhaps it's not the craft beer community who get duped. Is it newbies or people experimenting? Supermarkets are always trying to dupe us, to be honest. I mean, buy one, get one free for the price of two, where you may only be saving a matter of pence, is always a duping. They always used to sell the sweets on the way up to the counter when you're paying, so the kids want to ask for the sweets. So I'm not convinced. I do agree with, I think you said Katrina, about and Green King was my example. They created a brewery called Metropolitan, which I'm presuming is probably just a post box or something. But they also rebranded some of their existing ales and put them from 500 mils into 330 bottles. Yeah. Things like the Yardbird Ale and stuff. That annoyed me because that was just quite simply a beer you already done. And some of the beers from Belhaven, their Scottish brewery that they bought out, they got rebranded as well. I was like, well, that's not really what we're looking for. So that was the one thing I did have a problem with. But no, I personally don't feel duped, and I would think that it has given us more shelf space as beer lovers, because they haven't really taken away from the real ale offerings. So if you go into a Tesco, Sainsbury's, Tesco are probably one of the better ones at the moment out of your mainstream supermarkets. If we take M&S out of the equation, they tend to have their real ale offers, $3 for £5 or $4 for £6, but the craft beer section seems to be a little bit separate. Yeah. And although some of those beers are craft, maybe in inverted commas, they're probably still ones I would buy, especially when you're talking £1.79 for a bottle. So I'm not sure. I mean, it gives choice. I think going back to Roland's, if you don't know you're being duped, are you being duped? It's not as if they're charging the earth for this particular bit of duping. I think there's, the rebranding and the new brewery thing from Green King, definitely a bugbear with that. But the whole branding exercise, you can see why they did it. I mean, look at what Recordeling have done with cider.
Yes, yeah, no.
That's alcoholic syrup. And that is massive these days. I mean, they've made a fortune on that probably, I imagine now. Swedish cider, there's, barely a fruit has come into contact with that alcohol at any point. So, and I think going back to the blog that I last mentioned, knowledge. So, say you do want to ask someone in a supermarket, that's gonna come at a price. So the reason why off licenses started to fall away, we now have a few big off licenses, chains like Majestic, and we have bottle shops, independent bottle shops. But the off licenses, the Victoria Wines, the Unwins of this world, fell away because people wanted cheap and in bulk, and to buy all their stuff in one place.
Yeah.
Yes, you definitely paid a lot less for it, but you didn't have anyone to ask any questions. So it depends what you want. Do you want access to beers at a decent price, so your 4 cans of Vacation for £6, or do you want somebody who can tell you what they're about, and then you buy 2 cans for £6? So, I think there's a set of scales here. Is the way I look at it, and like I said, I think there isn't that much. I don't think there's that much of a problem. I like to be able to buy my beers from a variety of places, and sometimes a supermarket does do a job.
I think so, and we'll come back to that point. I just want to get into the second beer.
I'm glad you said that,
because I'm quite excited about this one. So again, this is from Odyssey, and this is Double Zombie Blood.
Cheers.
So this is an India Red Ale. Cheers, mate. This one weighs in at 7%.
As people can tell, we're making up for the alcohol-free night we did a couple of weeks ago.
We are, yeah. If the 12 beers that we did collectively last week wasn't enough, then this is. That's really tasty.
It's got a lovely bite to it.
Yeah, it's full of like kind of dark fruits.
A little bit earthy as well. It's quite sharp. There's a little bit of sharpness to that as well. So
it's very sharp on the finish. And again, that dryness is there again.
Very dry.
That's nice. I'm enjoying. I'm going to be interested to see how that warms. Yeah. In the glass. So coming back to the discussion, and he's saying about supermarkets do a job, and yes, sometimes they do, and we do. We all shop in supermarkets from time to time. So this week's opinion comes in a week where we saw the news that for the first time ever, beer sales in supermarkets have overtaken pubs. Across the 145,000 pubs, clubs, hotels and restaurants, they've now been outsold by supermarkets in this last year. So from the 44 million hectolitres, which is around 7.74 billion pints, that's a lot of beer.
That is a lot of beer. That's roughly what Steve will be drinking at Indie Man at the weekend.
That's what I'll be trying to consume, yeah. Sold in the UK during 2015, 51% of that was sold on the off-trade, which is dominated by large supermarkets. The remaining 49% was obviously sold in pubs, clubs, hotels, that sort of thing. And they're using examples in here of supermarkets selling slabs of beer. So your likes of 18 cans of Stella for £14, which is the equivalent to about £1 a pint. As they're selling, all of the big supermarkets selling slabs of beer, that's quite shocking news in a way.
It is shocking to me because although I do drink a lot of beer at home, my preference is drinking it in a pub.
Yeah,
pub or bar is still my preferred option. Being somewhere close to the actual bar, being there with friends and stuff. So yeah, I imagine a lot of those stats are definitely bumped up by those offers where you can buy case of 12, case of 18, case of 24. That does make a difference because even in the off license when we used to sell the slabs, you could not compete with a supermarket. Once supermarkets moved in on that, it doesn't matter what offer we were selling them at. You can't compete with the amount of bulk purchasing power that they have. And during the summer, they're always advertising these bulk offers, or when the football's on, bring your case of cold beer to a barbecue kind of thing.
Yeah.
There must be a lot of it is made up by that. It'd be quite interesting perhaps to find out if there's a second level of stats within that where you could find out whether it was like the bulk macro, because I can't imagine our specialist bottle shops are making up a very large percentage of the off-sale market. Same with the online shops. A lot of it is going to be the bulk buying in supermarkets that you can do.
Yeah, and interestingly, that comes in a year. So 2015, there was no major football championship. There was no major sporting events last year. So it will be interesting.
So this is 2015 numbers?
This is 2015 numbers. So it'll be interesting to see what those numbers are like for 2016, where we've had the Euro Championships, we've had the Olympics as well this year.
A fairly decent summer as well.
Yeah, will those figures have gone up? Interestingly, the same report says that sales of cask ale have also held up well. So they've risen from 7.3% of all beer sales in 2010 to 8.2% 5 years later. So it's taken 5 years for just under a percentage increase of cask ale sales. You could make the correlation there that's the 5 years of the craft boom. So people are also wanting to experience different beers.
Yeah, I think so. And also a lot of those different beers you want to try are only available in bars, pubs, tap rooms. So I can understand that. It doesn't seem like a big percentage, but pint-wise, there must actually be quite a lot of extra cask beer going out. So that's quite good. I mean, didn't someone say recently there's about 1,700 breweries in the UK now?
Yeah, that was announced today.
Yeah, so
1,700 now.
There is a lot of beer being churned out, and whatever umbrella you want to put it under, cask, craft, whatever. I mean, 1,700 breweries. I'm pretty chuffed with that.
That's a lot of beer being produced.
That's a lot of beer being produced. So it's interesting that there is a little bit of a balance on the stats there. You like to think that the good will out. So
I think
the good beer and the good places will carry on. I was in the Victoria last night, one of my favourite pubs, Colchester pub of the year last few years, East Anglia pub of the year a couple of years ago, and it was busy in there on a Sunday night, and that's where I drank cask beer last night, and that's where I want to drink cask beer. I have to admit, I don't drink much real ale in the bottle at home, so I don't buy real ale to drink at home. I drink real ale when I'm out and have it from the cask. But where do you sit on this, Steve?
It's interesting because I don't feel as though I've ever been duped by a supermarket. I think it's,
I don't know, some of those early beers you had on the Beer O'Clock show.
Maybe, yeah, but you can put that down to inexperience or a lack of knowledge and not taking the time to actually read the label. So I think, you know, while we are seeing an increase, and as I say we're seeing an increase, I think it's maybe slowed down now where the macros have stopped trying to impersonate craft beer because they know they can't do it.
They just buy them instead.
Yeah, they just buy them out instead.
So rather than pretend and make your own, well, let's just buy them.
But I think for me the result is what we've seen as a result is we've seen more craft lines available in supermarkets. I mean, if you look this year, the biggest one this year was the Vocation cans appearing in Tesco's.
Yeah, like I said, 4 for £6.
Yeah, that would never have happened were it not for some of those impersonators, or were it not for your likes of maybe Adnams taking on a craft range and doing it really well.
Yeah.
And kind of opening the doors for the supermarkets, and maybe some of it is just common business sense that supermarkets are seeing that this is coming. We need to start stocking these beers in our supermarket.
Well, you know, our senses, our easiest and latest senses are eyes, and if you look at some of the cans, you know, I think we all agree that 2015 and definitely 2016 years of the cans, that you see some of these cans on the shelf. I mean, I bought some cans in to work for Macmillan last Friday, and everyone, when I was setting it all up, and this was about 7:30 in the morning, and said, "Oh, I thought you were bringing in some beer. That looks like fizzy pop."
Yeah,
you know, I had some Magic Rock, some Beavertown, and some Vacation, and no one thought it was beer at all, just because of the way the cans are designed and everything. So, you know, if you put those on the shelf, and also again, cans take up less space. So again, if you're looking from a business perspective, you could perhaps have 2 shelves of cans versus 1 shelf of bottles. Then commercially, like you say, Steve, it makes sense to have craft beer on the shelves. Hopefully we're starting to see what we class as craft beer, but you know, I think we all acknowledge that we'll still pick up a bottle of Lagunitas if it's on the shelf at $1.79.
Yeah,
is it craft beer anymore? You know,
well, there's that, and you know, who's not going to go into Marks and Spencer before their train and pick up a can of New World IPA, but by Northern Monk for $2.20 or whatever it is you can pick
well,
up.
exactly. So you know, I would say it's a good thing on the whole, a good gateway for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And if people decide to buy that and have it in their house when I come round, rather than having bought a slab of something else, then I'm probably going to be quite happy about it.
Well, I mean, just to finish up on this, the one point I just want to go back to is the point that Gavin Barron made in terms of the supermarkets doing craft ranges well. And I think we should just acknowledge that Marks and Spencer have, for a number of years now that craft range
massively.
by tying up with large UK regionals to produce a range of what are their own label beers.
Yeah, I think they've done fabulously well with that. I mean, they've always had a time with a few, so they've had a fairly long-standing time with Oakham, a long-standing time with Meantime, long before they became part of the macro scene. So the fact that then those beers presumably were quite successful, which led them to tie up with other breweries as well. You know, and they always advertise who the breweries are. The breweries are always listed on the labels. Yeah, it's not like it's hidden. And some of them you can guess if you know a little bit about them. And they have then the clear range in the which are done by the people like Northern Monk and 4Pure, which are available to buy anyway. So you could have a fairly decent party off a full Marks and Spencer's range of beers, to be honest.
Yeah, and just on that note, I suppose to finish the discussion, are we being duped? If you go back to my first ever Untapped check-in, it was Sainsbury's own brand Scottish craft lager, which we all know now is Schiehallion by Harveston. So was I duped? Maybe.
I would have that now.
But I'm happy that I was duped, because were it not for that beer, I maybe wouldn't have ended up going down the route that I've gone down.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fairly good summing up. We are coming at this from a position of knowledge.
Right, time's cracking on. So let's do the news. So we're going to do the news at the end this week.
It's not as long as last week's, is it, Steve?
No, only a few items this week, and I'm going to rattle through them fairly quickly, to be honest with you, because they're all quick. So Carlsberg have rebrewed an original 1883 lager. So this comes at the end of a 3-year project to rebrew the lager. It's now available in the UK in bottled format. Retails at $12.95 a bottle and is available for purchase at London St Bart's Brewery. I'm not sure I'm going to be rushing out to spend $12.95 on a bottle of lager.
Was that the St Bart's Brewery, Smithfield?
I think so. It just says London.
Okay, it's 10 minutes from where I work, so I might have a little look at that.
I want to be as positive as I can about this next one, but it's really difficult not to.
Well, your voice doesn't sound very positive, so up it. Come on.
Shepherd Neame have unveiled a new brand this last week. Kind of looks a bit like the old brand.
It does.
If I'm honest.
It does look like the old brand.
All they seem to have done is lost the red background and added a hop to their shepherd's crook. But that's now rolling out across all of their branding. So keep an eye out for the new look Shepherd Neame. Beavertown have announced plans for a first bar and distillery. So looking into the first quarter of next year, they're hoping to open up their own bar. Looking at a site in East London and long-term plans to open up their own distillery.
Ah, so they're following Adams.
Adams
are trendsetters.
They are indeed, yes. Next one is, so this is from a piece of news that was sent to us by Roland, who's had quite a few mentions this week at Has Been New Boy. Check out Steve and Roland and their beer podcast for weekly reviews. There is a homebrew competition at the Manchester Coffee Festival. It's on November the 5th. Entry into the competition costs £5.90, and we will send dried coffee flowers to brew with, plus entry to the festival and a chance to share a homebrew with their punters. It's all being sponsored by Otter's Tears. If you want any more information on that, I would suggest you get in touch with Roland on Twitter at HasBeenNewBoy and ask him for details.
Can I just throw in there, I've quite enjoyed the last couple of Beer Bods podcasts that they've done for the couple of beers. Roland and Gary have rambled non-stop about everything apart from the beer. Brilliant. And I've quite enjoyed it myself.
Steve's obviously away again then.
Steve must be hating it. So I'm sure he will mention the rambling when he comes back. But I have to admit, I've quite enjoyed the rambling.
Sorry, Will. And the last bit of news this week, and hold the klaxon, shit the bed, there is a new game changer on its way. Being released at Indie Man this weekend from Magic Rock is a new IPA called The Hypnotist at 6.8%. It has been brewed with Citra, Mosaic and Simcoe Cryo hops, lupulin powder.
Steve's got a face on him, but I don't want to see ever again.
I have no words as to how that makes me feel. Hopefully I'll be able to report back on how great that was next week. So that's the end of the news. Time for the Prizeless Prize.
Yep, Prizeless Prize this week. I feel like we should have a bit of a drum roll, so if you could work on that. Thank you very much. And 4 contenders this week.
Is it me?
You are in contention.
Woo! Come on.
So, in contention, Beer O'Clock Show with his picture of our setting for last week's recording, our flight to beer.
I like that one.
Yeah, I liked it as well. Yeah, I think you did.
Not the one I thought you'd choose, but
I like it because it's the colours and also the fact that the iPad's there. It looks like we're about to work.
But we did work.
We did work, but it looks like we were. The next one is from someone who's had a few this shout outs already. Plim Sean, a nice glass of Hogsback, traditional English ale. And then we have one from Son of a Gun, the Papa Midnight Black IPL, which looks very nice with the bright blue sky behind it. However, the winner this week is from Hopzine Rob. I'm sure a few people have heard of him before.
No way you giving him the Prizeless Prize over
I am,
me.
because he's got a lovely Magic Rock Brewing growler in the Magic Rock tap room with all the cannonball in it. And you've got a little bit of condensation on the outside of the growler. So apart from the fact that he's taunting Steve by putting the picture on there, I actually quite like that, bearing in mind the space it's in as well. So congratulations to Rob, the big box of nothing will be winging its way, and perhaps Steve will take it with him when he next goes to Leeds as well.
I think Rob may well be an indie man, so I can maybe give him the big box at this weekend.
Oh, there you go. Congratulations.
Yeah. And I do believe that's a first time ever for Rob as well. So well done on that one, Rob. Okay, so let's get the final thoughts on the double zombie blood India Red Ale from Odyssey Brew Co. Mate, what did you think of this beer?
Well, it's very drinkable. I love the little bit of the earthy quality in it. Carbonation has stayed true to it. And yes, I'm getting a little bit more flavour now that it's warmed up a bit as well.
There is, and for me, there's almost a hint of the sort of flavours you get off of a barrel aging going on in there.
Yep, I see where you're coming from.
As well. I mean, is
that your subtle hint to Odyssey to barrel age this beer?
No, I think, as I said earlier, I think what Odyssey are specialising in is hop forward beers, and I wholeheartedly disagree with IPAs being put into barrel age. I just think it's wrong with them. So I think I've really enjoyed both of the beers.
Both the beers are fantastic. I preferred probably preferred the first one, but not by much.
Okay, so guys, you can still get involved in Hopinions every week. Look out for the polls on Sunday night to get involved. We'll be talking more Hopinions next week, and in the meantime, you can find us at Beer O'Clock Show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also find me on Untapped at Beer Show Steve. Martin, where can people find you?
Beer is the answer, and I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and on Untapped.
We're pleased to say that Opinions are still able to bring you discounts from Ales by Mal, beer merchants, eBrewer and Hot Burns and Black. Check out beeroclockshow.co.uk/discounts and make sure you stay around until the very end of tonight's podcast to listen to Martin's interview with Duncan Sambrook, because it is a good one. So until next time, cheers folks.
Cheers. Okay, well, I'm here at the Sambrook's Brewery tap room with Duncan Sambrook, the founder. I'm also here with Matt Chinnery, also known as Half Pint Gentleman from Twitter.
Thanks for coming down.
No, it's a pleasure. Duncan, the first question has to be, why did you decide to become a brewer, and how did it all become a reality?
Gosh, it's quite a difficult question to answer because there's lots changed over the last 8 years, and certainly when I started in 2008, it was more of a love of beer, and I'm sure you hear lots of brewers saying the same thing, but it was a love of cask beer, and I grew up in Salisbury, drinking things like Hotback Summer Lightning and Ringwood, Old Thumper 49er, and had a lovely experience with those quality cask ales. And I came to London, and I think, yes, there were some pretty good beers in London, Fuller's London Pride. At the time, we were getting quite a lot of stuff down from Adnams, Timothy Taylor's, but there just wasn't that real local offering.
No.
That one that you go to and you go, he's just down the road. I can go and speak to the brewer. I can go and grab their beer. And it was about bringing that local offering of great cask ale to London, which I think was missing at the time.
Okay, so if I remember the history of the brewery correctly, 2006, Great British Beer Festival. You were having a few drinks with your friends, and a chat started.
A chat and a beer crawl.
Yeah.
So we started this was in the days where the Great British Beer Festival was laid out by county. So we started in Cornwall. My brother, a friend of mine, then went to Devon, and we had a lovely beer. And then we went to Somerset, and we walked our way all the way through the different bars into London. And London was the first place that we found that there was no beers on any of the Canberra bars. And that was because Fuller's had their own stand. But it was almost like the penny dropped then. It was like, wow, I've just gone up from Cornwall where there was 15 fantastic microbreweries, and through my home county and up to through Sussex as well. And you get to London and you think 8 million people, no local microbreweries.
Yeah, well, I guess by 2006, Young's had already sold up. Meantime, we're brewing, but they wouldn't have been GBBF invitees anyway. So yeah, you would have been left with just Fuller's.
Absolutely.
Which, as good as Fuller's are, and there's no point saying anything else, they produce a very good range of cask beers. That was it. And like you say, so you wouldn't have had a local beer unless you were local to Chiswick, would you?
Absolutely.
So, okay, so 2006, you're having a chat with your mates, and an idea has been planted in your head. you're working in the city as an accountant, or
in capital markets. So
capital markets,
helping companies float.
Right. The leap, which it has to be said is a leap, from doing that in the city, I worked in the city myself for the last 20 odd years, to deciding I'm actually going to brew beer for a living. Talk us through the couple of stages that got you to starting out, the actual selling beer commercially.
I think it did help that I was working in capital markets, because I was working with some fantastically entrepreneurial people. So a lot of the companies we were working with, you'd see guys in their 60s who lived their business for 40 years when floating, and they had passion and drive and energy, and I didn't have that in my job. So there was definitely a realisation that I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something which I had a passion for, and I think it was just that moment where the two things just combined, the beer, the idea, and the fact that I wanted to do something on my own, and that was the catalyst. Then it was really testing the market, and I'm happy to say I've got some really great friends who supported me along the way, but they were ruthless when I came up with this idea, and every time I came up with a plan about what I was going to do, they'd send me back to the drawing board and say, well, you haven't thought about that, you haven't thought about that, and you haven't thought about that. And it took me 2 years really from that fateful trip to the Great British Beer Festival to actually getting the idea off the ground. A lot of unpaid work experience, as many people wanting to get into brewing do these days. I think at the time there wasn't a lot of people doing that, and I remember working in Stonehenge Brewery particularly, and Otter Brewery particularly. I had some fantastic experiences there, and the guys were like, why would you want to do this? And I'm digging out the mash tun, and they loved it because it's free labour. So, but it was not many people were doing those sorts of things at the time. Got great experience about actually what the nuts and bolts of were to run a brewery, being out on a dray, delivering beer, seeing how the sales teams work, seeing what it is to actually put a pump clip on a bar, help sort of do all the seller services stuff, all the things you don't really think about. And then I had this very, very lucky meeting with a guy called David Welsh, who happened to be the ex-managing director of Ringwood Brewery. He'd retired, he'd sold his brewery to Marston's, and that was another sort of step towards realising the dream, because he was a guy with some fantastic experience, and I'm sure he'd admit this if you asked him, bored witless in retirement. He'd had enough of golf, wanted to get back, doing something, being involved in the industry, and I managed to persuade him to put his brewing boots back on, and he came and brewed the first batch of Wandle with us. In fact, I have David to thank for the recipe for Wandle. It was very much his idea, and although we discussed lots of recipe formulations, I still remember the first day he turned up, and we put something together, and we tasted it a week later. That went down the drain. Then the second batch went through. That went down the drain. The third batch, and he had this habit of walking around with a white overalls, full overalls, not a lab coat, just overalls with welly boots. It's just absolute apparition. And he came in, and there was a little office just downstairs from where we are now. And he goes, I've just got a feeling about this. And he'd been talking to a hop merchant about Boadicea hop. Boadicea wasn't very much used at the time.
Okay.
And so we used Boadicea, and it just transformed what we were trying to create into a lovely session ale, something we were very proud of. I think it's very difficult to brew a flavourful beer at that ABV.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard that a lot from people who, because you didn't start off by doing home brewing as such. A lot of home brewers have said that to do a English session ale is probably one of the hardest beers to actually do. Mm. So the fact that you ended up nailing it perhaps on your third attempt isn't so bad, as it happens. Mm. So, I mean, something else I read was that, Dave made a bit of a suggestion to you when you first said about there's only one way of doing this, and it sounded like it was going big. At the time, how did that sound to you?
It was like, firstly, I think it was a real endorsement about what we were doing, because he thought we had something. The original plan was just simple 5-barrel brewery, as a lot of people set up in the UK. You can do that, and you can prove a concept, but it's not going to break the bank if it goes wrong. So the fact that I'd had this guy who is a bit of a legend in the West Country in terms of his brewery, and his experience, saying, you know what, you need to go 4 times the size, was actually a big endorsement and made me think maybe I'm onto something. Now, I would have never thought that the beer market would have changed as much as it has done now, but actually that meeting and him telling me to go back to the drawing boards and pull up together something which is 4 times the size was really the making of Sambrook's.
Okay, so like you say, it was you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Was you ever worried? Because like now, when there's so many breweries like starting, it seems like maybe the worry's not there as much because you see so much other success. But at the time when you opened Sambrook's up, it was like there wasn't that. Was you ever worried about that, or do you ever think, oh, are we doing the right thing?
I've always backed myself, and to a certain extent, the fact that I've got that confidence to back myself, I didn't have a lot of nervousness of setting up a business until this thing called the credit crunch arrived. And the timing was uncanny because I literally handed in my resignation in April 2008. We signed on a lease in July 2008 and Lehman's went bankrupt in August 2008. And so I literally just converted my entire life, all my life savings, everything to this project. And I was like, oh crap. that is a defining moment in my career at Sambrook's, is just that knowledge that things were going to go wrong. And we actually lost 2 investors, so we put together 10 investors to help us grow the business. Myself, my initial friends who were at the Great British Beer Festival, David and 5 others, and 2 of those said, actually, it's too high risk now, we're pulling out. We'd already committed, we'd already signed on the dotted line. I put a deposit down for a whole raft of kit, and there was, possibly a squeaky bum moment.
I bet there was.
And it was very humbling because at that stage I just went, you know what, I'm committed. I got on the phone to every single person that I knew and just phoned them, and I had to ask them for money. And I said, look, we've got this idea, we haven't got anything yet, but we're already committed, we need your support. And I've now got 25 shareholders who are fantastic, who've been supportive throughout everything that we've done, who get us, who help with everything from people that are in HR to people that are in sales to people that are friends of friends of friends. So third removed, who I'd never even met before, coming down and going, look, I just want you to be a success and helping to make it work. So in those early days, there was a lot of, look, just get the thing done and work hard and we can prove the concept. And I think overall we have, and it's been fantastic to be here and be one of the vanguard of the new brewing wave.
Well, I think it's a fair enough title. I mean, like I said, when you started, by then there would only have been 2 breweries in London. If my memory serves me correct, that would have been Meantime and Fuller's. So therefore, you were leading the way. Whether it felt like that is another matter, but you probably just thought, I need to make some money at some point here. But what were the challenges then for a new brewer, a new startup, versus say what they are now, which is 8 years on?
The biggest challenge then compared to now is actually getting people to buy into your concept. At the time, beer wasn't particularly cool or trendy. There was a real reticence of people to try new things. And when I say people, I'm actually talking more about the landlords and the bar managers who are running pubs. They were happy with their range. And it's very difficult to break into that. One of the things that we learned really quickly was you had to do a lot of work to get onto the range, but then once you're on the range, you tended to stay there for a long time. The opposite is probably true now, in that it's very easy to break into a range because there's lots of opportunities to get into a guest ale rotation, but it's much more difficult then to stay on and be a proven concept. So we benefited in the early days from being new, in that once we had broken into the scene, we could stay on the bar for a long period of time, but it was an awful lot of work to get there.
Okay, so you had to do a lot of legwork initially, but then you could stay put, whereas now probably less legwork, but you stay on for a lot less time.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, I do feel a little bit sorry for some of the breweries that set up, because you will have probably 20 pubs call you and say, I want your first batch. So you will sell your first batch, your second batch, your third batch, your fourth batch, and then there's probably another brewery that's opened up by then. And so all of those people that have just bought your new beers have then gone on to the next new brewery, and 3 months down the line, you'll probably go, oh wow, nobody's buying my beer anymore. And suddenly it probably dawns on people, you've got to sell more beer. And brewing actually isn't about brewing, it's about selling.
Yeah.
And I think that was drilled into me really, really early doors. It's about selling. And that's why we started with one product at the time, because we wanted to get people to recognise the product. We wanted people to see it in multiple locations, and we wanted people to have confidence in the quality. So it was all about one product, consistent quality, and then people can trust us as a brewery. That's why we started Wandle. A year later we had Junction. A year after that we had Powerhouse Porter. And it wasn't really till our 4th year we then started to expand our seasonal range.
Okay, I didn't realise it was such a gap, because Junction, for me, is my personal favourite of your cask ale range. But what you're saying is that Wandle was 2008, Junction 2009, Porter 2010. So effectively 3 years to have 3 beers.
That's right, yeah.
Presumably you just wanted to see what the feedback was all the time, see what people thought about it, what the buy-in was,
Yeah.
things like that. With regard to feedback, and this is more of a personal question as an untapped user, as a brewer, owner, founder, do you pay attention to things like Untapped, Rate Beer, those kind of sites? Do you look at the feedback, the scoring? Is that of interest to you?
I used to. I do less so now. I think there's one thing I've learned is that people that drink beer have very, very diverse opinions about the beer that you brew, and certainly something like Untapped for me is driven as much by flavour as it is by marketing. And so actually if you look at some of what generally wins lots of accolades in something like Untapped, it'd be a Russian Imperial Stout or it'd be something super duper.
Yep.
Wandle is never gonna win loads of accolades in Untapped, but it sells a hell of a lot of beer.
Yeah.
And also, if you look at certain breweries as well and the way they position it, their average scores will be higher than breweries that don't have the right marketing. So the local guy down in, I don't know, Devon, for one better county, that hasn't invested in marketing, hasn't invested in getting in the right bars or whatever, will get a lower score overall than somebody in London who's got access to PR and great marketing and those sorts of things. So I think I have to. So originally I spent loads of time like, why don't they like my beer? And conversely, that's great. I love the fact he likes my beer. Now I'm sort of like, well, there's lots of influences towards flavour which are not necessarily under my control. It's how the publican looks after it.
Yep.
It's how it's portrayed in a bar. Is it on? Have I got my pump clip there? Is it on a back bar? Is it unbranded? Those sorts of things. And actually, what generally is the perception of that drinker? If it's a drinker that loves really, really highly hot beers, I'm never going to score well because ours are more malty, they're more balanced beers.
Yeah, far more rounded.
Yeah.
They're not honk bombs, are they?
Yeah.
That leads me to you obviously, first time I went to the London Brewers Market in Spitalfields a couple of years ago, discovered that you guys started doing a bit of keg. What prompted that move from a brewery that was cask ale for maybe 6 years? So why have you opened yourself up to the keg market?
Why? I've always seen ourselves as holistically a brewer and agnostic to the form of dispense, and that's our ethos. So if I look at where our beers have come from, it's been cask firstly, because that was my passion.
Right.
Then it was bottle, because I wanted people to be able to drink my beer in a bottle. Then it was keg, because I wanted people to understand that we do the whole range and we were tapping into a different type of consumer that might not necessarily want to drink cask. So it's very much being able to brew everything across the whole range and engage with consumers that are after different things. So we brew every single beer differently depending on the dispense. So we don't brew a Wandle in a keg because it won't work.
I don't think there'd be much point.
No.
There really wouldn't.
but we do it in bottle, but we brew it differently in bottle. So we change the flavour profile because we try and fix it for that marketplace. And then on the keg side, we can have some fun. We can do a Russian Imperial Stout. We can do the collaboration that we did with Heretic earlier in the year, which just won't work on cask either.
No.
So actually, there's, I guess, two things coming in here. It's widening the range of beers that we can do, and it's appealing to different types of consumer.
Yeah, definitely. And also, you have less worry with certain kind of dispense methods versus cask. Cask is the high maintenance,
Yeah.
isn't it? So your keg version does enable you to get into different places. I think Matt was saying earlier he'd seen in Wetherspoons in Victoria. You know, that's not a bad place to get into. There's quite a busy throughput through there, so that's not bad. I guess to finish off, what's the future? What's next?
Well, I'd like to think that we are the South West London brewer, and that's very much our ethos now. I see London becoming more provincial and more villagey, and so you've got lots and lots of breweries setting up and becoming, whether it's Brixton Brewery or Hackney Brewery, and it's becoming smaller within a larger city. But I'd love to say that we're the South West London brewer, and it's about us being proud of what we are. We do a lot of stuff with community, so it's about extending our business and brewing to the wider community. So it's engaging with local kids who want to come and work here. It's engaging. We've just had our 8th birthday party down in Tooting Common, which is called Beer by the River. Not by the river this year, but it's always been by the River Wandle. But we outgrew our venue, so this year we've gone to Tooting Common, and I think it's going to be Beer by the Common now. And that was fantastic because we had loads of people come down. It was food, it was music, and it was beer. And I think what I've always said about brewing, and the thing that really appealed to me when I set up the business, was if you cast your mind back to the ideals of a brewer in Victorian eras, they were very much right at the centre of the community. The brewer had the same sort of status as the mayor, and people looked up to them as a bit of a moral compass. They were very proud of having their breweries, and I think we're coming back to a time where that's still the same. Beer's lost its way, it's become less important, but it's very much about, it's a great social lubricant. You have to have a responsibility when you're a brewer, and you meet our head brewer, Sean. He's fantastic, and he does loads of stuff, not just with pubs, but he does stuff with consumers and with the wider community. And it's about positioning us back in that wider community, having fun and enjoying good beer.
All right, well, that sounds wonderful. I'm all for that. And thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.